Hi, everyone. This is going to be part 4 of our episodes on the Shapira Scrolls. And as I've indicated in prior episodes, if you're a Christian, you should be interested in this because these are scholars who, if they prove this satisfactorily to themselves and nobody pushes back, this invalidates Jesus because, number one, Jesus is no longer the prophet of Deuteronomy 18 because Deuteronomy 18 doesn't exist. It's not included within the Deuteronomy book that allegedly was earliest. It doesn't have anything after chapter 13 until about chapter 2022. And you get rid of the apostasy clause in Deuteronomy 13. That's gone too. And Jesus is quoting from Deuteronomy 17 and 19, which don't exist in the Shapira scroll, which allegedly is the original Deuteronomy. So anyway, so we're going to be reading today from Benjamin Suchard, A Valediction to Moses W. Shapira's Deuteronomy document. And this was published in Bibliotheca Orientalis in 2021. And what's the highlight of this episode is, I'm going to leave it for the very last slide, is Suchard is going to blow up Dershowitz's use of the famous 3 pages he found recently of Shapira, and he's making a big deal of the fact, he has these transcription notes and shows there were errors in his transcribing it, so that means he's an honest man. I said it's plausibly his own forgery notes, but he actually gives a good explanation as well as what they are. So we'll see that at the very end. And again, I'm just going to throw my 3 cents in here. Everybody who are in these scholarly discussions are just ignoring the big elephant in the room. I think they're trying to be overly polite, and there's no reason to be. We have to use common sense to make decisions, and sometimes it doesn't depend upon paleography. Sometimes it doesn't depend on all those things. It depends on common sense. This guy Shapira was engaged previously in the fraudulent sales of the Moabitica. Okay, he had already gotten paid that. Nobody sued him to get it back, but they were determined fraudulent, and he sold them. He's an antiquarian dealer. He can make money. It turns out that the value put on these scrolls, had they been paid for by the museum, would have been $124 million in current currency value. There's a lot of motivation, he points out, to commit a fraud. Third, I don't know where I am in numbering. Ultimately, he ends up, even his family, after he dies, they sell it for something. So there is always a pecuniary interest in this, and that after his wife sells it, after he murders himself, his wife sells whatever was left, and then that's gone, and nobody knows where it is. So, but now the most key fact: he kills himself. Why would you do that promptly right after this is all going on? Why would you do that if you're innocent? Why would you do that? You've confirmed everyone's belief that you're a fraud. So the answer is that's exactly what he was doing. You wouldn't do that if you were innocent, if you weren't the one who's forging it. So the evidence is overwhelming if you just use common sense that this is a bogus document. But the scholars step back and they're going to go, we're not going to go there. We're just going to stick with our expertise, which is paleography and all that. I'm an attorney. I look at evidence. That's what we do. This guy would be convicted and sent to jail probably if we had him today and he hadn't killed himself. Well, if we could sentence him after he had killed himself and seek a recovery against his estate, let's say, it would be an easy case because he's not defending himself. And that means he didn't want to defend himself. He couldn't defend himself. That's the whole point of killing yourself. Anyway, so let's read on. And I wanted to extract one thing from the middle of the paper and bring it up here because it's very important to realize the significance of the Shapira scroll, if it were true, is enormous. And that's why Christians need to take a look at this and be sure you are not going to be blindsided by this book being adopted by everyone says it's for real. Everyone's going to accept the Shapira scrolls. Okay, so this is what Suchard says here. In the author's view, meaning is Dershowitz's view, V is not a forgery. Valediction of Moses is not a forgery. That's it. Dershowitz renamed the Shapira scrolls the Valediction of Moses, and obviously he's whitewashing off the criminal name of Shapira. The Valediction is not a forgery, but something much more thrilling, a First Temple period source text of our book of Deuteronomy. That means the time of Moses, First Temple, just prior to the First Temple. This spectacular claim has met with a great deal of media attention, and rightfully so. If Valediction is indeed a proto-Deuteronomy, that means is the first Deuteronomy, this is a bigger discovery than the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, I mean, this would be the text of Deuteronomy that we never saw, that was the original. It would be quite justified for scholars of the Hebrew Bible to drop whatever they are doing and turn their full attention to this text until it has yielded its secrets. So this is not a small issue document. It's a huge impact when you put it into the big picture of the history of Christianity and Judaism, all in this one book, if it were true. Okay, and I'm going to make a library loan of this article. It's not a long article, but it's in PDF form, and you can go to the description that will be with this video, and there will be an Airtable link to just this journal. You double click here where it says full PDF on the right, and then you'll be able to download the article. Now, I just want to back up here and say something that's interesting. Is Suchard mentions that Dershowitz, Idan Dershowitz, who came up with this book, and he called it The Valediction of Moses, giving the Shapira scrolls a nice, cleaner name. He says this book has been published open access and can be downloaded for free from the publisher's website. So that would make it appear that Idan Dershowitz has no economic motive. However, look at the price of this book at Amazon, $143. It's not a big book. So it couldn't cost more than $23 to produce this book, and we have it on PDF. Okay, and I want to talk about that in a second. So this is about, if he could sell one, I would say it's about $120 over cost. Okay, times 1,000 would be 120,000. So if he can get 1,000 people who are scholarly to have to buy this in order to have the conversation with him, he's making 120,000 off of his scholarly friends, all donating $100 to his living. And if he could convince them, it would be make him a world famous scholar and a multimillionaire in the end for having been the one who found it out. Okay, so this is not a project with no economic interest whatsoever. It's not a detached situation where someone has some that kind of thing. Now, the other thing I want to point out is that PDF online is unlocked. Okay, and I want to show you. I'm going to pull it up to show you. That means I can change this book. I can put in anything I want. So now what I have to say is that PDF, I think any scholar looking at it would go, oh my gosh, this is an unlocked text. I can't rely upon anything in here. I got to go buy this $143 thing. So let me show you that just so you can see I'm not making this up. Okay, so here's the text, and all text should have a lock on it if you're going to distribute them to the public, right? You don't send it unlocked. You send that to your editor, your book editor or something to let them do edits. So I've just hit here my edit in Adobe PDF, no big deal. I'm going to change it to Nichols. I'm going to make Nichols the author of this book. Great. Let's go down here and let's change something substantive. Let's take a look at one of his arguments, and I'm going to improve it. How about that? I'm going to put in here the book of Tom and Jerry. This should never happen, ladies and gentlemen. Do you see what I'm doing? This is ridiculous. He is totally. Now watch this. I'm gonna save it. One thing is to lock it. The other thing is not to allow anything saved to it. Okay, it's still there. I just saved it. It should have cleared it up. There's another setting you could do it. You would make it that it's not saved. Now, I've saved it, ladies and gentlemen, with the name of Idan Nichols. No longer is it Dershowitz. It's saved. I don't know if you can see it's whited out. So I could change it to Smith. Watch this. Okay, and now this button up here on the top left, it's open again, and I'm going to hit save. It shouldn't save, but it does. I can rewrite this entire book and make it into some phony baloney stuff. That corrupts his entire text and can't be used by scholars anymore once you realize you're looking at an open document. It shouldn't be open source in the sense of open to anybody to change. So this is a real flaw. And what does that cause? A scholar who wants to pursue truth can't rely upon this text and has to do what? They got to go pay the $143. So it's a gift, but it's not a gift, in my opinion. I mean, I don't know that he knows that happened. Okay, I'm not going to say he deliberately did this, but it's a gift that keeps on giving here because the way it's been distributed, it's open, unlocked, and no one who's a scholar can rely upon that because anybody could have changed it. His brother, his sister, his mother could have changed it, rewritten something she didn't like her son saying. That's how bad that form of distribution is here. Let me make another point. Eden Smith, I'm addressing Eden Smith. No, I'm addressing Eden Dershowitz. If you are relying on an Eden Dershowitz's book and you assume it's not been changed, you can't, because I just showed you how easy this is to do. Okay, it was unlocked. It's distributed unlocked. And then if you try to send this to somebody else to try to convince them to believe in it, you have to be aware that anybody realizes this is unlocked can't take what you just sent them seriously. So then even people who are lay people who are investigating are going to have to buy his book in order to make a decision here about what they think is in the book. But it could be a totally phony baloney thing. And that, again, forces many other people to have to buy something that may not be interested in enough to spend $143 to buy it in a book form for paperback. All I'm saying is this form of distribution that he did, open source, was a mistake. And it's too late. Now the book has been sent out. It could be corrupted 100 different ways. And nobody will know anymore what's the original form of this book. It has to always, Adobe PDF allows you to lock your books. And in fact, that's its default setting. So somebody unlocked this who would have to be the author, Mr. Dershowitz, or his editors, or somebody who had permission to use his Adobe PDF account. That's how it works. I have an Adobe PDF account. My settings are my settings. Nobody can change them. And how did this get changed? How did this get unlocked? Okay, now before I do the readings, I just want to recommend everybody to look carefully at this page if you're a Christian, because these are quotes of Jesus from the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 17 and 19, right here. It's in the Dead Sea Scrolls, so Jesus is quoting something that existed in his lifetime. But this claim of Mr. Dershowitz is that the text we're looking at, the Shapira Scrolls, goes all the way back to the time of Moses, and therefore he is showing that these passages don't even exist. Deuteronomy 17 and 19 don't exist. So he is telling us indirectly, although he's not directly saying it, our Jesus is fraud. He's not a prophet. How could he quote specious portions of a Bible that doesn't have these texts in it? That's what he's trying to tell you. So you need to know that's the number one issue why a Christian has to look very critically at this. The second issue is that the Deuteronomy 18 passage is gone. This is the prophecy of the prophet to come. This is where it says in this passage, God Yahweh tells Moses, I will raise up a prophet among your brothers like you. I'll put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I shall command him. This is a special prophet known as the prophet. And this is quoted in Acts 3:21-23 by Apostle Peter. And he's claiming this is who Jesus is. He's the prophet. So Jesus is not only the Christ, he's also the prophet. You might not know how important that is, but it's major. But Christianity doesn't want to look in that direction for some reason, but that's a second view. That's a second status that Jesus has. It's crucial. This passage would be gone. Peter would be talking in the wind. He'd be quoting himself, quoting a passage that no longer exists, no longer was really there, was corrupted somewhere later in time. That would destroy Jesus' legitimacy of his apostle Peter and destroy Jesus as well as the prophet. And that's key to who he really was. All right, so we will just point that out to Christians. Jesus will be invalidated if the consensus becomes uniform and everybody agrees our Bible has been corrupted on that passage, that Deuteronomy passage that Jesus is quoting. All right, now I'm going to start reading the article from Mr. Suchard. In his 2021 monograph, The Valediction of Moses, that's the Shapira Scroll, Adon Dershowitz argues that the manuscripts offered for sale by Moses Wilhelm Shapira in 1883, generally considered to have been forged, were genuine and contained a pre-exilic source text of Deuteronomy he refers to as Valediction of Moses. Based on Dershowitz's new critical edition of the text, this paper examines the historical and philological evidence for this thesis. Valediction's literary dependence on the Masoretic text, that's a text that only existed in I think it's approximately from 600 to 800 is his first editions, AD. Okay, so this is late recent times. So Valediction of Moses' literary dependence on the Masoretic text can be demonstrated on text critical and linguistic grounds. I'm going to pause there. That means this is not a exilic text going back to the time of Moses. This is something that was written at least sometime after 600, 800 AD, because it's relying upon Masoretic readings, not on the original readings of the text that existed in the time of Moses. An analysis, okay. And then it says here, let me start over. Valediction's literary dependence on the Masoretic text can be demonstrated on text critical and linguistic grounds, which makes a pre-exilic date of composition highly unlikely. Well, of course, how could it be from the pre-exile time? An analysis of the historical, literary, and linguistic arguments presented by Dershowitz, moreover, shows that nothing in Valediction proves its authenticity, while the orthography and certain linguistic features strongly support the identification of this text as a forgery produced between 1870 and 1880. That's page 364 of the article. Then, introduction. In 1883, Jerusalem antiquities dealer Moses Wilhelm Shapira presented a number of European scholars and the British Museum with what he claimed to be an extraordinary find: ancient manuscripts containing a Hebrew text bearing a strong resemblance to the book of Deuteronomy, but with many passages missing, written in Paleo-Hebrew script. Despite much initial enthusiasm, the scholarly consensus settled on the identification of these leather strips as forgeries, leading to Shapira's disgrace and suicide in the following year. The manuscripts disappeared soon after. Ever since, however, scholars have occasionally suggested that the original assessment was mistaken and that these were authentic texts from the Second Temple period, or perhaps even earlier, meaning the time of Moses. Most recently, the authenticity of Shapira's manuscripts have been defended by Dershowitz in a monograph entitled The Valediction of Moses, after his designation of the text. Henceforth, he calls it V, Valediction, or V, partially co-authored with Naam Patel, Chapter 6. The book has been published open access and can be downloaded for free from the publisher's website. Again, I told you it's unlocked. That's dangerous and makes it unreliable that any PDF anyone circulating to you, you cannot know if it's been altered or changed. Continuing here, based on various transcriptions and drawings of the manuscripts, Dershowitz has prepared a critical edition allowing the text to be studied as never before since the original copies were lost. This reconstruction of the text and its freely accessible publication is an admirable accomplishment for which Mr. Dershowitz deserves full recognition. Besides this reconstruction in both square script and the original Paleo-Hebrew characters, as well as a translation, Dershowitz's book analyzes several aspects of the text and the events surrounding the forgery verdict. In the author's view, meaning Dershowitz's view, Valediction is not a forgery. The Shapira Scrolls are not a forgery, but something much more thrilling, a First Temple period source text of our book of Deuteronomy. This spectacular claim is met with a great deal of media attention, and rightfully so. If Valediction is indeed a proto-Deuteronomy, this is a bigger discovery than the Dead Sea Scrolls. It'd be quite justified for scholars of the Hebrew Bible to drop whatever they are doing and turn their full attention to this text until it has yielded all its secrets. Dershowitz's claims have not met with universal acceptance. Important early responses include those by Christopher Ralston, footnote 4. You'll see there in its title, Deja Vu All Over Again, The Antiquities Market, The Shapira Strips, The Menahem Mansour, and Idan Dershowitz, published in March of 2021. Next, Ralston emphasizes that an epigraphic text that has been lost cannot be authenticated. Pause. What he means is, we're all talking about not the original picture of these documents. The pictures were worthless. We're not talking about these original strips of leather where we can actually look at it and make a much more detailed, fine examination. We're looking at something that has been completely lost. How do you make any decision about the reliability of that text anymore? It's become impossible. In other words, what he's saying. So it should just not even be accepted. Anything anybody says now, oh, it's authentic because somebody drew a picture of it. Okay. Then Jonathan Klawans, footnote 5. And this is the view I hold currently of what's going on here. Jonathan Klawans wrote an article called The Shapira Fragments, an Artifact of 19th Century Jewish Christianity, published in March 2021. That's the answer. This is Jewish Christianity. It's the church he went to. Shapira was a Jewish Christian in Jerusalem. It had this belief that when you went to the confirmation in their church, that you would memorize the Ten Commandments and you would memorize the command, do not love your neighbor. And if you look at the Deuteronomy code, that it remains in the Shapira scroll, or called the Valediction, all that's left is the Ten Commandments minus the blasphemy command, replaced in that command with the command, do not hate your brother, very similar to love your neighbor in the confirmation sequence that's used in Shapira's own personal Christian church, Jewish Christian church he belonged to in Jerusalem. Very coincidental. No, Clowen saying that's not a coincidence. It's too remarkable for words. Next, Jonathan Clowens, who contextualizes the contents of Valediction, which in his view align well with Shapira's conversion from Judaism to Christianity. And that's what I was just talking about. And then the third person who this is being listed out by the author here, Suchard. This is a third person who criticizes the proposition that Dershowitz is making. That person's name is Meir Bar Alan. Footnote 6, it's called Review of Dershowitz's Valediction, uploaded on April 18, 2021. And these are full links that if you want, you can download. Who believes the manuscripts are authentic but must date to early Roman period. So that gets that Etruscan thing. So this is that person's suggestion, a suggestion we will review in the conclusion of this paper. I myself have written a brief article, so he's now going to be the fourth person he's going to name who've been critical. Originally submitted to the online journal Academia Letters. And just so you know, Academia Letters is known as academia.edu. And a lot of authors upload there, but they have to have certain protocols followed, and apparently they didn't do that. But he posted it with them initially, in which I argue that the manuscripts must be forged because the distribution of certain verbal tenses show its dependency on the Masoretic text or a text very close to it, which is irreconcilable with the Valediction's seemingly pre-exilic orthography. So somebody was trying to make it look older than it was, and it's really just from the Masoretic text, the 600, 800 AD period. So it's just impossible to be a valid document, just that alone. He then says, I have now withdrawn the paper due to my dissatisfaction with Academia's letters publishing practices. Okay, so they have a right of republishing and marketing your book or your paper to other academics, and usually not for any money, just for sharing. And that's how I got this document. He shares this particular document we're looking at. This is being shared freely. Anyway, so something went wrong in their relationship, but it had nothing to do with the paper. This article has been met by a rejoinder by Dershowitz and Patel, and that's here in footnote 8. I put the site down here. And you can download it too, by the way, if you want. The article has been met by a rejoinder by Dershowitz and Patel, in which they raise potential methodological issues surrounding my main argument, but do not, in my view, refute it. The present article is not meant to overly belabor the point. Given the potentially huge impact of Dershowitz's claim, it is important to make very sure whether it is correct or not. Wrongfully ignoring an authentic pre-exilic text would be a great mistake, as would it be to take a forgery for an authentic and important text. While Dershowitz's argumentation seems persuasive, when taken at face value, we shall see that the combined evidence strongly points towards a 19th century forgery, that means in the 1800s, as has been the consensus for nigh on 140 years. All right, and then this is I think the most interesting part of his introduction. He's going to tell you how much is at stake, and I'm going to just skip ahead so you can just see it. He's going to tell you that had these manuscripts been sold and be deemed past muster somehow, what was at stake? Almost 124 million pounds in British pounds today. So let's go back now and read this part of it. Dershowitz chapters 1 and 2 discuss evidence against the forgery hypothesis that we may call historical, as it deals with the circumstances surrounding the evaluation of the Shapira manuscripts in 1883. The author attributes the rejection of Valediction's authenticity to 5 main reasons. The author meaning Dershowitz. Dershowitz attributes the rejection of Valediction, that's the Shapira Scrolls, authenticity to 5 main reasons. As the Dead Sea Scrolls, one of the first reasons is the Dead Sea Scrolls had not been found yet. The story of ancient leather manuscripts found near the Dead Sea by a Bedouin was considered outlandish and unbelievable. So he's trying to say is, people who recently have wrongly rejected this Bedouin's discovery because it was considered too improbable, right? I don't know that has anything to do with anything. And I know that some people do think that matters. Yes, there are some scrolls that are in the dust that come out and they're real, and others aren't. So that doesn't it doesn't have any bearing. You have to use more detailed, in-depth methods to determine truth. Now it says second ground. Shapira had previously been embroiled in a scandal surrounding the sale of forged Moabite pottery featuring inscriptions. I'm going to pause there. So Dershowitz is blaming the fact that the forgery hypothesis had legs was that Shapira had been involved in the sale of other works that were later proven to be forgeries. I don't think that is a thing that should be ignored and treated as a thing that is the cause of the forgery hypothesis. It is the proof of the forgery hypothesis. Nobody had to invent the forgery hypothesis. It came out of the fact this guy was guilty of selling. He clearly was selling things that proved later. He got lots of money for it. That's sold for lots of money that were proven later to be forgeries. Whether he was complicit or not, apparently was never resolved because maybe nobody sued over it. But let's continue. Then the next one that Dershowitz blames the forgery, what gave rise to the forgery hypothesis was that Charles Simon Clermont Ganneau believed that he could prove the manuscript of forgery by identifying the leather as belonging to the margins of the Yemenite Torah scrolls. Okay, so I'm not going into that right now. A number of errors in Valediction's Hebrew allegedly pointed to a forger of Eastern European Jewish extraction. Shapira, by the way, was born in present-day Ukraine, so he was an Eastern European, so that would fit him. And Dershowitz again blames the forgery hypothesis on the paleography did not match epigraphic text known at the time, which, by the way, at the beginning of this article, he pointed out that that's conceded by Dershowitz as true, that nothing has changed about that. Dershowitz goes on to argue that none of these objections holds water. Chapter 2 presents Dershowitz's discovery of 3 handwritten pages. Now, this is I skipped over something else. I wanted to give people this very important review that he's making of what, if you read the recent article in Biblical Archaeology, Dershowitz makes a big deal that he found this 3 pieces of paper and there are errors and transcriptions, and it looks like somebody who's trying to write down what they see on the page of these scrolls and trying to do a good job of copying it, but there's some errors. And I explained in my episode on that, I said, it's just as easily, it could be he was drafting the forgery himself and by hand, and he had to make changes and corrections as he went. And so that's what explains what's on the page. But actually, here's something that this scholar, Suchard, is going to give that's a little more from a different background of information. So listen to what he has to say about this. Chapter 2 presents Dershowitz's discovery of the 3 handwritten pages by Shapira containing a transcription of Valediction and some remarks. Dershowitz identifies some uncertainties and transcription errors in these notes and argues that this shows Shapira's innocence. Why would a forger have produced a private transcription with mistakes? That's how Dershowitz presented it. Emphasis, private transcription. That was not intended for anybody else to see. Well, this is how he responds. Crucially, though, Dershowitz does not present any evidence that these notes were indeed private. I understand from our online discussion that he does not, in fact, have any. Dershowitz writes that, quote, it appears that Guth and Ginsburg, those were the 2 experts, one was from the British Museum, 2 experts that concluded the Shapira scrolls were forgeries, this Valediction of Moses, as it's been redubbed by Dershowitz, and transcriptions. Guth reported in this work called Letter Handschrift 63, page 63, that he had access to 2 transcriptions by Shapira, one from 1878, another from 1883. Pause there. This handwritten transcription that Eden Dershowitz says he found in some notes in a box match exactly what this gentleman said, Gutta, one of those 2 experts who found it a forgery. And then let's continue to listen to Mr. Suchard. And Shapira is known to have conversed and corresponded with Ginsburg, now that's the other expert, during the latter's preparation of his transcription. Okay? So then this is Bouchard's comment on that. I see no reason why the transcription recovered by Dershowitz, that 3-page document, could not have been one of those shared with the experts asked to judge Valediction's authenticity, the Shapira scrolls' authenticity. That the manuscripts might have been sold for as much as £1 million, that's equivalent to almost £124 million today, would have provided ample motive for a forger to go through the trouble of creating a mistaken, uncertain transcriptions in an attempt to bolster his credibility. So there you have it, a very reasonable conclusion that this man Shapira was put in the box, and many interviews took place between him and these guys, and he had to produce transcriptions, and he did, and Guth mentioned specifically 2 transcriptions were provided, and that means that Shapira himself was making transcriptions to help prove, not privately just to himself, but prove to these gentlemen that this was authentic. But that means he could do these transcription errors and all these kind of things to make it look like he's doing an honest job. He's trying. All right, so I hope the reading from Bouchard's article on the Valediction to Moses, the Shapira Scrolls, is been more helpful to you to make a decision however you want to view this, whether it's valid or invalid. I think the evidence is overwhelming, not because just these things that require extreme expertise that I don't have and 99% of the people out there don't have. Just use your common sense. People do not kill themselves when they're innocent of forgery and millions of dollars were at stake. And he could have been criminally charged, right? He's committing a crime. He's using, if he's a forger, he's committing a crime, and that could destroy his family. That could destroy their future as a couple, to be able to have assets, because it would be all taken away because he harmed the British Museum and all that if he's the forger. And forgery came at a price here. In other words, the British Museum is hiring top experts around the world, maybe let's say at $100,000 a pop, because this is going to cost them the equivalent of $124 million in modern pounds. So they're spending lots of money to get these experts to give them top opinions, and they're saying, no, it's a forgery. Couldn't they have come back at Shapira and said, we want you to pay us the damages of what we spent on these experts, because it turned out we think you're guilty. This points at you as the culprit. And so he can just bypass all of those problems, kill himself. His wife won't have, there won't be any lawsuits. Obviously, people take pity on widows, and she's innocent, of course, as well. So that would be the reason the motivation of killing himself is self-evident to me. But if he's innocent, it makes no sense. You wouldn't kill yourself. You defend yourself. You defend your honor. And then the other fact is he was doing this before. He'd sold the Moabitica, the Moabite information, or I think there were leather straps too, by the way. If he sold that, and I think there were stones also, and if he did that and he made a buku of bucks on that, and it's turned out later those were fraudulent, even though he didn't get sued in that case, apparently, doesn't mean that you have to take that into account. He has a pattern and practice of being involved as an antiquarian, dealing in trading in forged documents and information to try to make money. And that's so tempting if what you do is you sell, this kind of thing, antiquated pieces of paper and that kind of thing. If you don't have that in your bailiwick, I mean, nobody will even come to your store. But if you have it in your bailiwick of items, it's a way of making a lot of money. All right. Well, anyway, I hope that helps everybody. If you're on the fence, to help you make more certain where you think the evidence goes. But I believe that to me, I just have to know the suicide, the prior behavior that's consistent with being a forger in this instance, and definitely millions and millions of pounds in modern dollar terms were involved. The motivation for theft and crookery and being crooked here is enormous. All right. God bless. Take care. Ciao. Bye.